Hello viewers, welcome to a lecture series on marketing management, and in this very series we are going to extend our discussion on the topic of understanding prosumers in 21st century marketing, and this is going to be part 3 of lectures on the topic of prosumers. So my dear learners, you must have been hearing two significant terms, prosumers and consumer merchant. Nowadays these two words are very much in the corridors of marketing, and learners are very much interested in knowing what exactly we mean by the term prosumers, what is called consumer merchant, because we have been talking about consumers and merchants, but what is the outcome of the synthesis of these two words called consumers and merchant, consumer merchant, and producer and consumer, prosumers. So that is something which is actually the topic of our discussion in this very series of our lectures on the topic of prosumers. So in the previous lecture of mine, I gave you a brief background of what exactly we mean by the term prosumers, what are the different aspects of it, the year in which this term actually came, what are the different facets of it, and now I will be extending my discussion on the topic, and I'll let you go through the different theories and models of it, what are the opportunities which are there into this very segment, and of course the challenges which as a marketer we are going to face in this very new regime of prosumers in 21st century marketing. So with this as an agenda, I will be telling you about the prosumer and related concepts, wherein we have been talking about prosumers and sharing economy. We will also give a recapitulation of prosumers and co-production, and then we will start a detailed discussion on prosumers and self-production, co-creation, and different theories and models. So as you all know that the concept of prosumers, it was actually introduced in the very year of 1980 by Evelyn Toffler. Evelyn Toffler actually formally introduced this very concept of prosumer in 1980, and since then we have started talking about prosumption, and it has undergone significant development, and ultimately it is actually nothing but blurring the lines between the producers and consumers. So you can term it to be the elimination of a kind of elimination of the line between the producer and consumer, because at times you are finding the consumers in a very different role, in a different avatar, what you call as the reincarnation of a consumer, wherein the consumer has assumed the role of a producer and eventually acting like a prosumer. So you are actually having a basically a combination of two entities, one which is on the other hand called producer, and another is actually the consumer. So once a person assumes the role of assumes the twin role of these two, we can call it the prosumers, and it is actually a twinning of role between the producer and consumer. So we are actually going to blur the line between the producer and consumers, and eventually generating new ideas beyond the traditional production consumption dichotomy, wherein there have been lot of debate and discussion that as a producer you can't understand the problems of consumers, and on the other side producer says that consumers cannot understand the pain and worries which is being borne by the producer. So here comes the role of the synthesis of these two different roles, and it is there to actually generate new ideas beyond the traditional production and consumption dichotomy. So we all know that the concept of prosumer have actually transformed the role of prosumers in society. It actually underscores their potential to significantly contribute to the sustainable development, innovation, and enhanced service delivery. So owing to the benefits which are being generated by this very twin role of a consumer, this is very much in nowadays, and I would say it would not be wrong if I would say that it has become a fashion, it has become a buzzword nowadays, and it has become a new reality in 21st century marketing. So the journey of prosumerism, from its theoretical foundations to practical applications, it actually reveals a dynamic interplay of certain aspects, like I would say technological advancements, I would say regulatory evolution, and of course the societal changes, because once you are entering into the technological advancements and then going for regulatory evolution, these two are bound to bring some societal change. So here the journey of prosumerism is actually revealing a dynamic interplay of these changes which society is undergoing and witnessing in the 21st century marketing. So, as in the previous lecture of mine, I gave you a brief idea about the different related concepts of prosumers, and there we talked about prosumers and sharing economy, we talked about co-production, and henceforth we will talk about the remaining aspects, that is called self-production and co-creation, which is actually a multifaceted and it may be explored through various academic lenses, as I told you, and we are going to explore, we are going to examine, we are going to evaluate, we are going to discuss all these related concepts through different academic lenses. So, as I told you that in prosumers and sharing economy concept, here basically prosumers are actively engaging in both producing and consuming goods and services, and they actually enhance the diversity and richness of these offerings. And if you remember exactly, I gave you the example of the Airbnb, where they can not only host travelers, but also book accommodations in different other cities, and it is actually a showcasing of their dual role as a prosumer. So, they are not only behaving like a consumer, but also they assume the role of a producer. So, here comes the significant role of prosumers, and conversely there is a sharing economy through digital platforms which enables prosumers to reach wider audiences. So, I would say thanks to the technology, thanks to the ICT revolution, which have made this entire concept of prosumers a reality as on date, not only at the national level, but also at global level. So, this is actually a new reality, this is actually a new phase of marketing. Barring few challenges, still because of its benefit, it is very much into the practice, and we are making use of this very concept. And we talked about the different aspects of it. We talked about intermittent collaborative consumption, we talked about collaborative consumption, and also the pseudo collaborative consumption. That is something which we discussed in detail. So, I am not going into the detail of it again. I just gave you a brief reiteration of what exactly I explained in the previous lecture of mine. And then comes collaborative consumption, and in collaborative consumption, as the term itself is indicating, they are actually collaborating, co-creating a particular brand, and in this collaborative consumption there are different flavors of it, there are different dimensions of it, and the very requisite, the very apt example for it is a prosumer who contributes to a crowdfunding campaign. Suppose if I am a consumer and I am actually contributing to a crowdfunding campaign, here I am not only supporting a project, but also interacting with the creators, integrating into the broader value creation process. It means I have become a prosumer. So, I am not there only to avail that particular fund, or I am not there to avail a particular funding from that crowdfunding campaign, but I am also there to make proper changes into their entire process re-engineering. So, this is something where as a consumer we assume the role of a producer, and this is the beauty of it. Then comes the third related concept, that is called prosumers and co-creation. Some people think that collaboration and co-creation, how would you make a distinction? Yes, there is a difference. In the development of prosumption, co-creation is one of the most significant features and processes, and it actually co-creation shifts the traditional paradigm of business unilaterally creating products and services for passive consumers. So, we are going to create products and services for passive consumers, and in several fields you would find that prosumers exhibit co-creation. For instance, it is very much popular, it is very much in practice in the field of art and culture, and we call it presumption in art. So, here most of the researchers, they have actually discussed how the viewers and audiences, they are no longer passive consumers, but they have become active participants in the co-creation and interpretation of artworks, co-creating with artist prosumers. It is just like a student is undergoing a particular research under my supervision, and there is another co-researcher who is participating in the pre-submission viva or in a presentation. So at times we get very innovative and good ideas from the researchers who are actually doing their own researches. So they are, on one hand, they are actually acting as a scholar, but sometimes they do assume the role of a supervisor at times. And as a supervisor, I do honor their suggestions, that yes, this is a valuable suggestion, cause while guiding the scholars, at times we feel that scholars, they also run some extra mile and they find some problems. So in a way, we actually go for co-creation. So they are not only finding a problem, but also an alternate solution to that existing problem. And if I have to give example of it, I would say in the 3D printing industry, as we all know, the technology becomes more widespread, more and more consumers, they are transforming into prosumers. Once they have learned the technology, they start disseminating those services. They assume the role of a particular system, of a particular product or service, and they are co-creating customized and personalized works. And there are a number of examples, like previously I gave you example of video gaming industry, where companies like Valve, they allow users to create their own game. Imagine that whatever modifications or what they call as mods, which can be shared and used by broader gaming community. So these are the examples which actually provide us an understanding of co-creation. Now, when we talk about prosumer and production, we need to understand that co-production is actually a subcategory of co-creation. So, if you think that co-creation and co-production, they are the same, no, there is a difference. Co-production is actually a subcategory of co-creation, and it is defined by the scholars as the process where inputs from individuals who are not in the same organization. So you are getting input from outsiders in a way, I would say. You have inputs from outsiders, and they are actually transforming into goods and services, whatever we are producing. So in this production process, once we start getting inputs from outsiders, and we are transforming our entire production process, or what you call as goods and services, it means that you are actually into your production, there is an increasing role of consumers, and you got the role of prosumers into the production process. So this entire process of co-production actually includes the collaboration of citizens and public providers to produce services that serve the public interest, and they are actually empowering citizens by involving them into decision making and production processes. My dear learners, I would give you a very popular example of India as a nation. When we had to decide the symbol of Indian rupee, the government of India actually invited creative ideas from public at large. So anybody or everybody can give their suggestion, and to your utter surprise, and most of you must be knowing that for Radian's symbol of Indian rupee, what we got, we are actually having that symbol into our computerized system also, we are using it. So that rupee symbol is actually contributed by a citizen of India. It was not the government who decided. So it's a kind of a co-creation, wherein the citizens are actually creating a symbol, that you decide what should be the symbol of your rupee. Earlier we used to use INR, Indian rupee, as for denoting the Indian currency, that is Indian rupee, but now we have the symbol of rupee. So that is the best example to me as far as the public services are involved. It is the best example till date that it is the citizen of the country who have actually created the design and symbol of Indian rupee. So we have to understand, my dear learners, that this entire co-production is actually the collaborative development of a particular product. There are several examples to it, and open source softwares are one of them, which are actually contributing to this entire process of co-production. So if I have to make a distinction, I would say co-production primarily focuses on creating public value through collaborative efforts between the citizens and public providers. While if you talk about prosumers, they actually create value not only at personal level, but also at the level of community, and they often interact directly with the organizations and other consumers. So this is what I wanted to tell you about the prosumer and co-production. Now sometimes we are finding consumers as producers, but that production is for their own self consumption. So we call it to be prosumer as self production. So in contrast to co-production, here is a concept of self production. Now as the term itself is self explanatory, that you are actually doing the production for your own consumption, and best example for it is if you are growing vegetables for your own consumption, you are making homemade clothing, or you are baking bread at your home for own usage, that is called self production. And here also you assume the role of a prosumer, because you are not only consuming but also producing the same. So this entire prosumption involves creating goods and services both for both personal uses as well as for sharing or selling it to others, and it is driven by community engagement and innovation. So it actually emphasizes sharing and collaboration within a broader community, wherein you are sharing the products or services whatever you have manufactured as a consumer to the general public also. Now comes the another term which is there in the corridors of marketing, about which I discussed with you at the very outset of this very lecture of mine. I talked about the consumer merchant, which is a combination of two terms, consumers and merchants. So this term consumer merchant is actually defined by the Bernard Kova and Veronique Kova as a hybrid figure. They combined the roles of consumer and merchant, and they coined a term called consumer merchant. So it is a combination of these two significant terms, consumers and merchant. For instance, if I have to give an example of it, I would say, in contrast with the traditional consumers engaging in market related activities, these consumer merchants, what they are doing, they are actually promoting products on social media in order to reach to the broader audiences. So imagine your consumers becomes, although there are different levels of consumers involvement as a merchant, but these consumer merchants, they are promoting products on social media to reach broader audiences. Some people ask me that are you indicating towards affiliate marketing? Affiliate marketing, yes, to some extent it is the same, because you are as a consumers you are using a particular product, and on social media you are promoting that specific product. You become an advocate for that particular brand, and you are doing it on social media to reach broader audiences. So there you assume a role of a merchant, and that is why, but by nature you are a consumer, but since you have assumed the role of a merchant, you become a hybrid personality called consumer merchant. So consumer merchants, they actually create value by promoting and selling products, whereas prosumers are empowered through production. Because at times my learners get confused, sir, prosumers and consumer merchants, don't you think they are synonymous to each other? No, they are not synonymous to each other, because there is a significant difference between the two. Consumer merchants, they are creating value by only one way, that is promotion and selling of product. So they are actually behaving like a merchant, they have to sell it out. So their role is limited to the selling process, whereas prosumers, they are empowered through production process. So they have a significant contribution like a producer to the entire process, wherein in case of consumer merchants, their role is limited to the selling activity, or what you call as promotion and sale of the product. So in fact, prosumers, they are empowered through production related activities, and they are creating value by integrating consumption with the production for personal usage, or it can be within a community context as well. So this is the basic difference between the consumer merchant and prosumers. And more specifically, if you ask me the distinction between the two, that is prosumers and consumer merchants, it actually lies in the scope and nature of their activities. So it is the scope and nature of their activity which is going to create a distinction between the prosumers and consumer merchants. Consumer merchants are primarily focused on the selling of goods. As I told you, they may also look for potential services. They are operating within a commercial framework where their primary goal is market related activity. They have nothing to do with the production process. Their primary goal is market related activity. So if you remember this very role of these consumer merchants, you can very well draw a line of a clear line of distinction between the two concepts. So this actually means their involvement is largely limited to promoting and selling products, and often this is done for some financial gain. Your motive is to do it for financial gain. Unless you have some financial gain, why would you actually go for becoming an advocate of a particular product? So when you assume the role of a merchant, although by default you are a consumer, then you become a consumer merchant. So your involvement is largely limited to promoting and selling products. So whenever these two terms comes in front of you, you should not get confused. You must have a clear idea, and that is why I made it a point to give a clear explanation to these two terms. So prosumers, they actually, consumer merchants are basically limiting their activities to marketing and selling, wherein I would say, I would correct myself, not to marketing, because marketing itself is a broader term. They are limiting themselves to promotion and selling, wherein prosumers, they engage in various production related activities which may not involve any direct money exchange, or at times any commercial products or services provision. You may do it for your own self. You can go for having a production for self consumption, but then too you are a prosumer. So suppose if somebody is actually creating and selling handmade crafts through an online marketplace, or promoting their products on social media, they are actually fitting the consumer merchant model, and you can call them to be a consumer merchant, wherein someone who makes craft for personal usage and shares them within a local community, or if you are selling them at a local market or even an online marketplace, it exemplifies a prosumer. So as a prosumer, you can produce and you can sell, both the activities can be there, but as a consumer merchant, your role is limited to a merchant only, to the act of a merchant only. So my dear learners, this was an effort to make a distinction between the two terms, prosumers and consumer merchants. Now when we talk about the concept of prosumer, since it came long back in the decade of 80s, of course there are different theories and models. It is no more a new model, but yes, of course the practice of it has actually increased over a period of time with the emergence of ICT, or I would say proliferation of information and communication technology. It is actually increasing, spreading in a rampant manner. That is why we are talking about the concept of prosumers. There are certain theories and models of the concept of prosumers. So a prosumer is actually an individual who acts as both a producer and consumer, and this dual role of a consumer turned producer is actually elaborated upon in various theories and by academicians, by practitioners, and they are supported by research models which actually explain their characteristics and motivations. So it becomes very pertinent for us to have a discussion on different theories and models which are prevalent into the academic literature related to the concept of prosumers. We must know that what are the different theories. So there are certain theories and some models are also there, and the first very popular theory which is there, that is called presumption theory. We also call it PT, that is presumption theory. What it does, this theory actually highlights the role of prosumers who are consumers that also take part in the production process, and thereby they are becoming the co-producer of a particular product. That is something which we have already defined, which we have used for defining the term prosumers. So unlike traditional consumers, prosumers are involved in various processes. I would name certain processes, and with that you would have a better understanding that yes, this theory says that there are certain processes in which these consumers, prosumers are involved, where those consumers who were earlier being labeled as consumers, they were not involved into those processes. For instance, designing new products. For instance, suppose if you have to design a new product, of course a consumer has, traditionally we had no role to play, but nowadays once we assume the role of a prosumer, we have a significant role to play in the design of a new product. Advising in communication, which helps companies better understand their customers. At times marketers, they are taking feedback of consumers about the recent advertisement, about their communication. that whether they were able to communicate what they wanted to or not, and accordingly that communication is being revised and it is being fine tuned to cater to the requirement, to cater to the objectives of a marketer, that what I wanted to communicate I should end up with the same message, and then of course adapting their offerings to meet individual needs. So these are the processes in which if you are involved, then of course you may be termed as a prosumer. So this theory that is called PT, presumption theory, it tries to give us a basic definition of what exactly we mean by the term prosumers. Now we have another theory with us, that is called value co-creation theory, and one model is also there that I will present before you in the next lecture of mine. I hope I could provide you a better understanding of the concepts of prosumers and consumers and along with certain theories. But this I am concluding this very lecture of mine. Thank you so much.